He has been our member right from the start. Yeah. Over to you, Kalapi, start.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to cut you off.
No. Please carry it. Please start.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I'd like to start by thanking everyone, especially TSI and especially Shri Kumar sir for inviting me, as well as Tarun sir for inviting me here to present today. Before we start, there are a few caveats that I'd like to go through, kind of few, how do you call it, disclaimers, so that I don't kind of incriminate myself in any way or form. The first disclaimer is I'm a terrible presenter, so I'm going to try my best to present the work and my thinking in a coherent way. The second is that the work that I'm about to present has a very long history and a lot of information. So to be able to condense it into 35 minutes, a 25 to 30-minute presentation was super difficult because I wanted to add so many things that I'd like to discuss. But I've tried to condense it. Let's see where that goes. Okay, so I'll start with a quick introduction. I'm a typeface designer and a font engineer. I run a small independent studio with my friend that you can see on the screen, Gunnar Williamson, who lives and works in Reykjavik. I graduated from the University of Reading in 2012 from the Masters of Typeface Design program. And this is a good place to say that it's a week ago today that I met Dr. Fiona Ross for the first time and visited the department for the first time to evaluate the course, which was in 2010. And another thing that the reason I am who I am, or the reason I decided to do typeface design, is because of Shri Kumar sir. He was the one who told me about Reading and told me about Dr. Fiona Ross's work. And I was privileged enough to visit her when I was traveling before I decided to attend the course. So after I graduated, I worked at another independent studio in London called Dalton Mag, and I was in charge of font production and complex script, typeface design, and font production relating to that. In 2016, Gunnar was working at the rival Monotype design studio at the same time in London. And towards the end of both of our kind of studio work, we would meet every Sunday at what can now be called like a proto co-working space. And we kind of decided, because we both were really interested in South Asian letter forms, we wanted to do something specifically with that and relating to that. So we started kind of deciding what would an independent studio look like, and in 2016 we took the plunge and started the studio. Today we have 9. Our studio is called Universal Thirst, by the way. The studio currently employs 9 people in total, including Gunnar and myself, and all of us work remotely. In the picture from right to left is Namrata, a typeface designer, Anushri, who's our project manager, then myself and Gunnar, and on the bottom row is Anaga Narayanan, who's also a typeface designer, Anurag Gautam, who's a typeface designer, and we don't have 3 people in the photo. 3 very important people. One person is on the call today, I hope, Hitesh Rocky Malavya, and two designers from London, Denis Jacheri and Michele Patane. And we collaborate over multiple different projects, and we make it work somehow. So when we went into lockdown, this was like not the new normal, it was the normal for us, for a lot of typeface designers, I'm guessing. Right, so my original plan was to talk about these 2 topics separately today, but when I started putting my presentation together, I quickly realized that the content that I have for Linotype Gujarati far exceeded the time that I was originally assigned to. So I decided to combine the 2 kind of, by offering my perspectives based on the learning gleaned from the design process of this particular project. And I'd like to start with a little bit of history. So this is not a chronological order, but it kind of is some sort of a chronological order, but things happened before, after, at least in the beginning. The project I'm going to talk about today is Linotype Gujarati, which there are multiple mentions of Linotype Gujarati in that list, and we revived it in 2017. We revived the design in 2017, it originally started off its life as a typeface, as a hot metal typeface originally designed by Monotype, the Monotype studio. Monotype actually started designing Monotype Gujarati in 1936. It was prompted to start designing the typeface with an order from Bombay Samachar. And here it says order is 37, but there were things, there were discussions happening from before, and Bombay Samachar wanted to kind of improve their workflow and improve the print production quality. So they approached Monotype to design the typefaces. They released the first version of what was to become Linotype Gujarati, or Monotype Gujarati 460, which was first released in 1938. Sorry, not in 1942. And I have really high quality images. Unfortunately, they are large size images. So I've kind of tried to take snippets from everywhere. The problem of the issue with the Monotype composing machine was that it had a very limited, it could only have a limited set of characters. And because it was mainly built around the Latin script system, where you typically need much fewer characters. So much so that a lot of Latin fonts had a lot of ornaments because there were lots of extra spaces. So in this case, you can see I have highlighted in purple, there are things kind of not falling together properly. Now this is obviously because of the limitations of lead type and typesetting. You couldn't really combine two forms together. But the interesting bit here is in the first line, the mer. So the way they divided the character set or broke it down so that they could fit everything in was they essentially used a combination of half form, or the first or the right or the left bit of the letter, combined with the kana or the vertical stroke to kind of dynamically form at least the consonants that have the kana. So that way they were able to reduce, so they had half forms and full forms with the same amount of characters. In 1960, Linotype Gujarati kind of started taking shape. Around 1959, Walter Tracy started, he was apprehensive because he had added Linotype Devanagari and Linotype Bengali, but he was apprehensive because there was not a ready market for Gujarati. But after the initial apprehension, he decided to move forward and develop like the typeface for Linotype. The initial drawings, keyboard layout, and list of the total list of characters was prepared by G.P. Vijapure in collaboration with Bapurao Nayak. And this is an image that shows their kind of scheme of single line slug casting. I have images of the keyboard as well, but that wouldn't have made sense here. So if anybody wants to get in touch with me there is an entire booklet that talks about the scheme. I'm happy to email the entire booklet after the call. Here you can see in order to fix, okay, there is a lot of context here, but I'm hoping that you will go and kind of read a little bit more about these things. If you go and look up how the Linotype machine worked, it was a single line of type cast as a single slug of lead. Which is why when you had matras like this, if there was an overhang, there was a very high probability of breakage, especially because the metal was still warm when it was starting to fall into the galleys. G.P. Vijayapure and Bapurao Nayak created this system where the matras were kind of vertical and didn't create an overhang. For some reason, or for unknown reasons, clearly, Walter Tracy, who was the head of the drawing office at Linotype, decided to instead license Monotype's Gujarati. I don't know if this image is clear, but under the image you can see there is a little disclaimer that says character designs adapted from Monotype Gujarati by permission of Monotype Corporation Limited. And what actually ended up happening was the design was a kind of a combination of the designs presented by Vijayapure and Nayak, as well as the Monotype design, but it was of course a lot more heavy on the Monotype kind of aesthetic. Here you can see they did adapt the Matra approach that the scheme had recommended, but there were still some issues with placing matras, and this was around the 1960s and well into kind of the early 70s. This is an image of the drawing of the bold cur. It's the drawing itself is about 4.5 inches, but it is drawn on a 12 by 12 square, 12 inch by 12 inch square as a pencil outline. And this was done because the method of making a matrix was to use a pantograph. A pantograph is kind of a mechanical object or mechanical machine that reduces the size of an original pattern. So it basically would have like a stylus with which you would touch the ends of these lines, and at the other end of the pantograph it would actually be carving the outline at a very small point size, and that's how the matrices were made. So this is a drawing there. A brief mention, I'm just going to mention Monotype Gujarati photo composition. Now, what we talked about previously was the hot metal composition system, which actually used lead and very heavy machinery to kind of compose either like a single bits of type into pages of type, or like lines of type into composing pages of type. The next technology, or next major technology, was photo composition, which utilized photographic technology. The matrices were replaced by these negatives, which had tiny exposed letters on them. And the way the design, the way, like the general, a general overview of how the system would work is there was a keyboard, and when you press the keyboard, the disk would position the negative in front of a light source, and it would photographically expose bromide paper. And that's how you would create kind of these compositions of type, which then you would use in a layout to kind of create an offset.
Hello.
I'm good.
Kalapi, sorry to cut you in.
Yeah.
Can you please reshare your screen? I think some of the members are not able to see it.
Yes.
They have joined later on. Yeah.
Okay. 1 second. Can you see it now?
Yeah, it is visible. Sridhar sir, are you able to see it now? I think they should be able to see it. Yeah.
Do you see the large? I just want to confirm. Do you see the large black page with the text,
Right.
or are you looking at my presenter notes?
I'm looking at the presentation.
Okay, cool. Okay, right. So I'm going to like I said, briefly mentioning photo composition for Monotype. They did change their design a bit, but that's out of the scope of this talk, so I'm not going to show the work that happened there. The next was the Linotype's version of photocomposition. Linotype had several photocomposition machines, the most remarkable of which was the Linotron 202, which was kind of around the late 70s, released around the late 70s, and kind of revolutionized a lot of the Indic typography around that time, because a lot of major publication houses and newspapers purchased these machines to do typography. And I'm going to come back to that because I want to talk about what effect that had on kind of our generation as typeface designers. So this is like just a single picture of the output of the Linotron 202. These are notes by, I think they're notes either by Fiona or Walter Tracy. I'm sure when Fiona watches the video, she will correct me. But this is basically just like we typeface designers do. They're looking at a proof and recommending changes. In photocomposition, a lot of actual changes happened. For example, you can see the matras are much better aligned. Spacing is much better now because there is kind of that the requirement, the limitations of the slug composition of like actual metal type not kind of being able to kern too close goes away, and you can do better kerning. The matras, the U matras, for example, are now back to how they should be positioned, horizontal instead of vertical. And this basically improved typesetting quite a bit. The next major change then was almost a few years later in the 1980s, when the first kind of early 1980s, when the first push to early digital technologies started happening. So you had very rudimentary glyph drawing applications like on the Mac. I don't know if this is too early for the Mac, but there was things like Font Chameleon, probably previous versions of Font Chameleon, and very, very early versions of Aldus. Aldus is Fontographer. So there was this big push by all of the IT companies, mainly Apple, Adobe, mainly Apple and Adobe and Xerox PARC kind of to create, and Adobe was the one that was responsible for the PostScript description language. And what the PostScript description language did was that you would get, it was an entire closed system. So you would have a computing machine and you would have a printer, or you'd have some kind of an output machine. And instead of, when you sent the print command, instead of rasterizing the outlines, instead of converting the outlines into pixels, it would rasterize them as PostScript outlines. So you had better, sharper outlines. This exists today as well. If you purchase any of the high-end laser printers which have PostScript version 3, when you print shapes from Illustrator, you won't get rasterized shapes. You will actually get proper vector conversion output. There is a little bit of rasterization, but it's not really rasterization. It's like just optimization. So that was PostScript. Very, very basic information about PostScript. There's a lot written about PostScript and the font wars. Yes, there was something called the font wars, which is great as well. So Dr. Fiona Ross joined Linotype Limited UK in 1978 and was the driving force for the development of non-Latin scripts. Sorry for there's no lack of a better term, because she didn't just focus on Indic scripts. She was focusing on a lot of other script systems, and particularly Indic scripts. So this is her in the foreground. This is the Linotype drawing office in Cheltenham, mostly or actually completely represented by women, and there is an excellent talk and research going on about women in type at the moment, which I can share a link with later on. So this was the Linotype drawing office, and Fiona started working on the PostScript version of Linotype Gujarati around 1983. these are all ink drawings. This is the this is an ink drawing of the conjunct stra. It's a little bit smaller, and we'll see like the comparisons of what it looks like now. But this is smaller than the drawings we saw earlier. And then now they were inked in because you had to take photographic proofs, which you will see now. She further improved the design. This is an image, is a reduced photographic proof of some updated consonants and conjuncts. And we'll talk about the design again, like I said, a little bit later. Another ink drawing of the consonant J with Icarus markings. The little lines of pencils you see are markings for the Icarus type system, which is another font digitization ecosystem. But in this case, Fiona informs me that that didn't really go ahead and do the Icarus conversion. So that brings us to 2016 in OpenType. So finally in 2016, Gunnar was commissioned by Monotype to work on producing a digital revival of the Linotype Legacy series, the Linotype Indic Legacy series. And this was kind of between the time when he was quitting his job at Monotype. They had already spoken about it, and he quit, and they were happy for him to continue after quitting to work on it as a consultant. So he recommended to Monotype that I too work on the design as somebody who had just been become a free agent and was available to work on projects. So the old PostScript fonts were released in 1989 and were still in Monotype's digital archive. So they were in a PostScript font format, Type 1 font format. And they became the basis on which we started our work. So what I want to do next is I want to show you a few glyphs, a few comparative glyphs, and then we'll go into the glyphs files, and I'll show you a little bit more about what it looks like. Right. So this is the original sources had both a bold and a light, and there was, because PostScript, Adobe was one of the original companies to introduce variable fonts in the kind of version or in the form called GX or multiple masters. You could easily take existing outlines, digitize them, and if the points matched, in some cases even if the points didn't match, you could do an interpolation between weights. So they had a light, they digitized the light and the bold, and then they interpolated the regular. And this is something I forgot to say when I was talking about hot metal. Every kind of design for hot metal and for photo composition was size specific. So they actually designed a separate outline for 12 point, designed a separate outline for 14 point, separate outline for 16, 18, so on and so forth. And here, at this pivotal kind of juncture, we are moving away from that and simplifying the workflow to kind of a one size fits all, which is kind of a important thing to remember, because in 2020 we are kind of going back to size specific design with the use of variable fonts. And what this means is what this meant for designers and drawing office employees in like the late 80s, early 90s, was they had to figure out a strategy to find a weight or style that was kind of, that would scale and work for the smallest point size as well as the largest point size. So usually the kind of the sweet spot or the Goldilocks zone was between 22 and 22 point and 28 point, depending on the typeface. So these digitized drawings, if I'm 100%, if I'm like not mistaken, are about 24 point of the Gujarati, are digitizations of the 24 point Gujarati. And I don't know if you can notice here, by the way, the left is the PostScript version, and the right is the version that we worked on. I'll talk about the quality, why the quality of the left looks a little bit wonky in a bit. So the original sources had, like I said, had a bold and lightweight, and we started by designing two poles, which was one was light and one was bold. So that we could use the same approach, we would interpolate the medians, and it was to be a 5-weight family. This is the light, and this is the bold. Second, yeah. Also, the early printers used to, the reason why the thins are extremely thin in the left-hand side design is because early printing, everything that was output from PostScript would actually blot a lot, so that there would be a lot of ink fill. So the designs were originally kind of made high contrast to kind of counteract that ink fill later on. Similarly, how you would design it even today for very low quality offset output. Which is why these designs are very kind of thin. So the first thing we did was to kind of beef up the thins a little bit so that they worked better across multiple sizes. We also fixed the overall proportions. We fixed the overall proportions of the letters. Things were a little bit, all over the place because of the conversion from photocomposition to digital. To PostScript. So we introduced some specific things there. But the biggest change or the biggest deviation or upgrade from the original was the design of the conjuncts. We redesigned all of the conjuncts to kind of reflect what the kind of the contemporary use was in kind of 2016. So from kind of the early use of PostScript fonts to now, there is, because so many people have produced fonts and kind of not perfected, but created a kind of a architecture on which new typefaces are designed. We decided to kind of update the shape. So this is like this is the main difference between these specific combinations. And I'd like to talk about the top combinations. You see that the bowl of the is huge. Now this is another problem that we get when we move from a size specific design to a design that is that does not need to, that actually scales when you are designing a layout. It's like, for example, if you use Bell Centennial, which is a typeface you use for really bad paper at really small sizes for telephone directories. When you make it big, you start seeing the ink traps, and you start seeing the shapes themselves are very crude, and they're crude because of like those specific use cases. So in this case, because the original Linotype Gujarati was meant for very small text sizes, especially because it was used for publication and newspapers, these were the kind of optical corrections that happened and which were carried forward into the digital realm. So this is a slide of the original Linotype Gujarati design. And this is what we did. I would love to show you kind of a one-to-one, but those old files are not actually working font files, so image comparison has to do for now. The reason why there are very few vowels here in the original PostScript file is, like I said, the composition was kind of it was done on the fly. So if you wanted to type A, the vowel A, you would use the and the A matra, unlike the modern Unicode fonts where you encode the A vowel as a separate glyph, and all of these as well, which are a combination of different vowel and dependent vowels. And this is the original conjunct set. There are a lot of designs that kind of speak back to foundry types from India. So this ru or hr, which you would use for something like hriday, this is a very typical example of foundry type design from Javji Dadaji or from Gujarati type foundry. And I have some examples that show, so these were basically these early adaptations of those designs for smaller sizes. And this is kind of this is some of the updated conjunct set. So we now have a lot more conjuncts thanks to OpenType. We are able to add a lot more glyphs to the font, 65,550 to be precise per font, which means that we can kind of go wild and add as many alternates or specific kind of optically corrected combinations. And this is the thin, the regular, and the bold. Yeah, so this is the design. And the perspectives that I was talking about previously kind of the main perspectives are collaborative design, this idea that there is a huge benefit of collaborating across different specializations. So Gunnar, for example, is not a native Gujarati speaker, but he is a trained typeface designer who is sensitive to the nuances of Indic typefaces. And we had Fiona as a consultant giving us feedback and cheering us on as we completed the design. So we had her as kind of a principal or an art director, and then myself as kind of a relatively recent graduate with some amount of Gujarati design experience in my bag. So this is a picture of the two of us. I just wanted to add this here because making this presentation reminded me of the time when I studied at Reading, and Fiona was my teacher, and this is her giving me feedback on my typeface. I think that is the time. I have I'm going to talk about this quiz and competition just now, and then I want to actually show you glyphs files if I have another 5-10 minutes. Rishabh, let me know if I'm running over time. So the quiz is about, I want you to tell me, okay, so let's talk about what the prize is. So I have 2 copies of Joost Hokkuli's Detail in Typography. Joost Hokkuli is a kind of a legend in Swiss typography, and this is kind of a seminal book based on his work. I have 2 copies completely untouched. As you can see, they are shrink wrapped to give away to students. So like so there is kind of a sliding scale to students, then to young professionals, then to professionals, and then anybody else. So what the question is, you need to tell me why the drawing on the left is an outline and the drawing on the right is is kind of an inked in drawing. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and show you the 2 files. Right. So here, these are the 2 glyphs files. On the left is kind of a very crudely converted glyphs version of the original PostScript outlines, and on the right is the new design. And I want to talk about the outlines a little bit. So let's start by looking at the curve. Here you can see that the outlines are not really as optimum as we as typeface designers would want them to be. Now the reason this is the way it is because first it has gone through several conversions of font format. So it's gone from these very rudimentary, very, very clunky 8 MB RAM computers that moved contours very slowly and were not really Bezier curves. They were like very, very rudimentary. You basically, instead of drawing a shape as a whole, you actually drew segments, and then the computer would put the segments together and create an outline. So there's no great conversion method from a previous format, like an old format, digital format to new format, which is why this representation of the design has a lot more kinks than you would expect it to have. The second one we already saw, so this was the main difference. This is a design from a foundry type, and I'd quickly like to show you the reference that I was talking about. Just give me a second. Yeah. So this is 10-point foundry type from India Type Foundry in Ahmedabad, but I'm sure it's based on matrices that originated at the Gajjar Type Foundry, and that's the in something like Hriday, which was then implemented in the original designs of kind of linotype hot metal, linotype photo composition, and made its way to PostScript. And we kind of adapted a newer version of what is now considered a conventional design. Again, size specific modifications. So here you can see the counter is large. Like I said previously, we fix the counters to make it work better at multiple sizes. And small optimizations. Now here you might not see a lot of difference, but just opening up closed counters like this to kind of give it a little bit more breathing room, and making the character wide overall, making things a little bit more vertical like they are in this connecting, as well as adding conjuncts that are not typically included in any of the old forms. This result was part of my research at Reading. Because Gujarati is originated as a cursive script but was formalized in the mid 1800s, I was wanting to kind of take it back to have a little bit more connected approach, and these were some of the experiments that kind of led to that approach. So that's it. Another quick peek at the quiz competition, and thank you very much. Again, Shrikumar sir and Tarun sir for having me here today. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Kalapi, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Yeah, I'm Sridhar from Hyderabad. I'm very happy to see you talking about linotype and Fiona Ross and photo composing and all. And I am also similarly lucky to work on linotype 202 mission and develop the font in Telugu for a newspaper. It's very nice you narrated and you covered the history and till the date. But what I felt while working all these areas in that particular decades, a monotype and linotype. Mostly monotype has done one mistake that they have taken the hot metal drawings straight to photo composing level so that they can be first in the market to bring fonts. And that too, they have to convince the customers that we have the font which has been used in used in hot metal, so that the look and feel of photo composing output is similar to lead type. So with this decision, most of the photo composing fonts failed. Most. A little bit of linotype also, I can say. The reason being, at the times the uh, developer and other things are very expensive. People used to keep the same old developer base and increase the flashlight for longer time, so that the weekend developer can also uh, give some output on that. With this, um, the original types which have been developed as a photo composing or disk based flashing, or so most of them are very thin, because the logic behind designing for a hot metal composing is to increase the life of the type. Like a freshly casted type, it is so thin uh, as a photo composing font, because over a period after 10,000, 20,000 or 30,000 impressions, still the type has to have the life to be carried out. Otherwise, it has to go back to recasting and get the metal done. So this era, they have not taken care or think further to develop a font tolerable on lead type or a photo composing standard font. So that is what I observed when I saw the first monotype machines and photo composing machines. So I am also very lucky to work in linotype. Dr. Pianoras was doing her Bengali PhD at that time. It was in the process. So she came particularly to see me and see my works and interact with me. I've been trained by her to program the intercharacter spacing or the overlappings or the kerning program manually done for 4 to 5 months after drawing. So as you said, the outlines and other things, I don't know whether I should talk now or otherwise it will reveal the your quiz. Shall I talk about it?
I mean, like I said, there is so much history that I've glossed over because of like the time constraints that I have.
Time constraint is okay.
So which is why I didn't I didn't include talking about the quality of the design or like the aesthetics of the design as part of this presentation.
True, I understand that you have constrained yourself to complete your thought process to serve on the dining table. Okay. Usually Gujarati thalis will be more number of curries covered with it. So South Indians we have very few. Okay. Anyway, the thing is you have presented very well, but those intricacies have been done in simply carried by several type designers or font designers or the software vendors who develop the fonts on their own. So I think that was the reason, as Dr. Fiona Ross has given an autograph that made this type be successful. So now most of the newspapers they are standardized as the Telugu is more complex than in any other scripts in Indian languages. Equally, Bengali.
Can we take questions from all the audience? Can we take questions from others?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, thank you, Kalapi, for this.
Thank you so much.
Later. Yeah, talk to you later.
Simply almost.
Yeah, please feel free to ask questions, all of you, especially the students. Most welcome. Please ask questions if you have any. Okay, Kalapi, I have a question.
Yeah, go on, sir.
Can you tell me about your experience as a student when you studied in MSU and then in Reading?
Oh wow,
The
that
way
was a
teaching is done in.
wow. Yeah, I think I don't know. I need a lot of time to reflect on that now. I'll say one thing. At the end of my time at MSU, if I wouldn't have kind of met you or spoken to you about what I was interested in, that wouldn't have led me down the kind of the typeface design rabbit hole for sure, and that I've already mentioned. But what I knew at the end of completing my bachelor's program was that I wanted to focus more on new media and emerging technologies. So if it was not for you, I think the trajectory was more towards what is now considered kind of this UI UX design, which at that point of time was considered human computer interaction and things like that. I think the main difference in the methodology, part of your methodology question, is because we are undergraduates, obviously there is a lot more instruction when we are in our bachelor's program. At Reading, they follow a very specific Scandinavian approach to teaching, and I just hope Jerry doesn't watch this, but it's this kind of teaching where they throw you in the deep end and you have to try to figure out a lot of the questions that you have. When you have a group crit session, which happens once or twice every week, when you ask a question, it's answered by another question. So you have to actually go and answer the question that was asked in order to find out. This is mainly because at an MA level, you are expected to be at a certain kind of a maturity level to kind of take in all this heavy load of information that's coming your way. And I must say that I was certainly not ready for that. I would have done much better maybe if I was in the, I would say I would have made use of the course a lot more if I had if I had a few years of experience under my belt, because there was just so many aspects to type that you have there that just scrambling to learn how to actually just make a font was kind of on my mind. And then making it work like basically all of the engineering stuff. So if I had to do it over, I wouldn't do it differently because I love where I am at the moment. And I don't know if there were any kind of opportunities in type in India in 2011, 2012. So even at Reading, we have Fiona. We get to interact with Fiona only. I would say 8 weeks out of the total course that we are there. She is there every week, but she takes her classes. Her classes are on the Tuesdays and on Tuesdays and Thursdays only for the first 4 months, when we kind of are diving deep into everything about typeface, everything about kind of multi-script typeface design. And then she becomes more like a consultant, or kind of like a guru, where you finish certain amount of work and you go to her with kind of an explanation of why this has happened, and she'll point you to resources. She'll tell you why, if it's incorrect, and point you to resources to tell you whether it's already done before, or if it's done before, how to kind of improve upon it. But yeah, I need to let me get back to you privately on that, or maybe even publicly on the Typography Facebook page. I'll think about it, put my thoughts together, and maybe.
Fine. Maybe you can write a blog later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, Kalapi. Menon here.
I was just asking about.
Hello.
Yeah. I can hear you.
Yeah, can hear me. Yeah, wonderful presentation. I noticed that in your team, Annika is my student, by the way. I think she.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, she got the SOTA award this year. That was again another very interesting. Yeah, about this thing. See, all the Indic font. One typical problem that you get in the justified setting is the word spacing, because there is no dictionary built in. So how that could be circumvented in the Indic font design? There is no hyphenation, end of the hyphenation practice, I think. How do one go about it?
Yeah, so in InDesign, because you are able to choose languages on a paragraph level or on text box level, what that language selection does is it applies what is known as a Hunspell spell check and hyphenation dictionary. Now these dictionaries are quite thorough, but the problem is that they're still not complete. All the Hunspell dictionaries are open source, and there are a lot of linguists and computational linguists that are continuously adding to the corpus of the hyphenation tables. I have a more of a philosophical answer to that question, which is I'm currently working on figuring out what if we did not kind of copy the approach of Western typography, how would we do typography differently? And the reason why we do the justification and the right align and all of the typographic hierarchy and structure and the typographic grid comes to us from the West, which is originally designed for a very simple writing system in context. So my idea, or I would never justify the text because, like you said, it just looks terrible, even if there are hyphenation tables. And I'm kind of trying to work out a style guide or something, so to speak, for like long-term use, for at least starting with Gujarati, to figure out how to kind of, what would be the Gujarati typographic grid if you were to rethink the typographic grid, and that's kind of a more interesting question to answer.
Yeah, I think that will work well with books, but I don't think that newspapers will ever agree for a left align and where the column is so narrow is the maximum problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. We just have to keep looking for an answer, I think.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for your question, sir.
Anyone else has a question, please feel free to ask. I request all the students, feel free to ask, don't feel shy.
Kalapi, if you permit me, I have another question.
Yes, please.
See, da and dha combination in Gujarati, the earlier it was adha dha and full da. And the modified one, you had the phonetically possible combination, because the reading system of each language is different.
Right.
When it's to conjuncts.
Right.
So when phonetically pronounced, we say yuddha, da and dha.
Right.
And the sequence in the beginning, the earlier typefaces, we have ada dha connected to the full da.
Yeah.
So was that the reason you have changed it to dha matra coming down to the da, or is it an influence of Devanagari even in Hiri or other characters? So do you have any specific thought on changing those things?
Yes, I do. I have. I think to answer your first question, I think it's both. It's the effect of Devanagari or Devanagarization of the Gujarati typographic script, as well as kind of moving it lower. The moving it lower, I've read and spoken to a few other typeface designers where they say that the extension of the longer extension of the is kind of a proxy for the kana. When you have the outstroke of so when you look at all the below combinations, they are visually shown to kind of combine to that outstroke, which makes it it's kind of a stacked conjunct. So a kind of a stacked conjuncts. In the original linotype Gujarati design, the reason why they couldn't, like I said, they couldn't not cramp it, but make it size specific, is because it was meant for such small sizes that it would just become a black ink blob. And not that foundry type that's probably not a great answer, because I have specimens of foundry type at 6 point and 7 point who actually do that. They're just bigger at the bottom. So it is, and at the end, it is just basically a question of design approach. But yeah, I agree with both. I think it's a effect of the Devanagari influence on Gujarati.
And the phonetical sequence is also perfectly expressed through that conjunct characters.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, because I thought this will be useful for the new designers to consider, not follow the previous things.
Yeah.
And, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. If there are any more questions, please go ahead and ask. I'm just evaluating all the answers in the chat so that I can announce a winner.
Hi, Kalapi. I have a question to ask. I'm
Yes.
Amit. I'm a first year master student in IDC. So I think my question would be more apt for your colleagues, or so I was thinking, if you are not familiar with the language, you are not very well versed with it, and when do you approach to design that typeface, then how do you what kind of difficulties do you face in that?
It's an extremely loaded question, so I may not give you an answer that is that you may may satisfy you, but I'll try. I was actually very apprehensive to design for a script that I'm not familiar with. Because mainly because when I actually started working on Gujarati, there were so many things in Gujarati that I didn't know at the time, because as a native Gujarati reader, you interact with the script in a very different way. You don't look at it from a linguistic point of view. You look at it from like a use case point of view. So when you start looking at it as a typeface designer and you start seeing all the bits and bobs that are required to make a typeface, you have to start understanding the system, the underlying system that makes it work. And this is where kind of I differ. I make a distinction between language and script, where language can be used however you want because it's kind of a form of expression, right? There are these basic grammatical rules, but then those basic grammatical rules are also kind of sometimes not followed for the sake of, for the sake of the art or whatever. But the underlying script system has a very specific set of guidelines and it only works one way. You can't kind of make it work in a different way, right? So as a typeface designer and from a technical point of view, not from an aesthetic point of view, I think it's most important for you to understand every nook and cranny of this underlying script system. What happens when you have different combinations? So consonant, 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 consonant with a modifier like a nukta or a anuswara, and then all of these permutation combinations. And what does that output? The other thing is that you have to look at history. I think history is a very important teacher. There is a lot of interesting work that has been done in typeface design, even especially when typeface design was analog. There are some great specimens by regional, like brick and mortar type foundries that are like just coming out. Not coming out, but people who have access to them are sharing them, scanning them, and like showing these excellent approaches to design problems those design problems exist now because of this. Because when type was metal, it was still a little bit high definition compared to what it was in like the early digital and up till kind of now, where the technology has kind of somewhat come to, like, we are at the best place where we can be with regards to digital type at the moment. So the first thing is you have to know the underlying system in order to produce the fonts, because designing a typeface is just half the battle. You have to still engineer it, and engineering is a huge amount of work. And you have to I always tell people that typeface design is kind of an intersection of design, linguistics, and computer science, because you have to know bits of all of this to successfully complete. You don't necessarily need to all the time, because you can be part of a larger machine. Like you can go work for Monotype where you only do the design, but it's always, as a practitioner, as a typeface design practitioner, it's always good to have good to have an overview of what it takes to design a typeface. Having said that, I must say that I have seen some really questionable designs by native designers, as well as designers who are not local or native to the script, and the other way around. So I've seen excellent work from native designers as well as excellent work from designers who don't read, speak, or I think they write to an extent, but not purposefully. But yeah, that's the answer.
I have something to add. May I?
Yes, please.
So, Kalapi, first of all, my heart goes out to you. You are a person with a huge heart to be sharing all these historical references. In India, we don't have access to many of these things which have gone to Europe and has become part of the museum and things like that. So, thank you so much for, such a wonderful and insightful presentation. I have a thought going on in my mind, and I'm not expecting you to answer. This is for the larger group. See, when we look at, and you were also mentioning, native speakers of a certain language, or people like you who at some point of time in your life spoken and written the script yourself. So what we find is that we are at a crossroad where there is a certain classic way of writing an Indian script, maybe Devanagari, maybe Gujarati, or my personal experiences with Gurmukhi. And that is often influenced by the tool which was used to write many years ago or centuries ago when the script evolved. Just to give you a comparison, Devanagari and Gujarati has a certain stress because of the flat nib which is used, as compared to Odia and some other South Indian scripts which were written on a palm leaf with a stylus, which led to a monolinear uniform thickness kind of a stroke. And in the last couple of decades, we have seen the monolinearization, or so to say, the Latinization of Devanagari or Gujarati. I know there is enough space for all kinds of variety under the sun, because as type designers, we often design something which we visualize and then leave it for the graphic designer to use the way they want to use it. But what is your opinion on this? So to say, the term which I would want to use is, so to say, the colonialization of our Indian scripts by trying to force the monolinear style in all the this thing.
Right. So I'm a classicist when it comes to this. I'm very fond of relying on traditional models to build new models.
Okay.
A lot of our work, and hopefully in the future, maybe in the next few years, if I'm invited again, I can show, and when it goes out of the usual NDAs that we always have to sign, we can, a huge chunk of our work, like you may imagine, is corporate identity typefaces, which are mostly monolinear typefaces. As a studio, our kind of overall ethos has been to maintain kind of the integrity and the history of the Indian letter forms. So we always try to push the client to, not push the client, but we always showcase design concepts that have that inbuilt. So for example, a quick example, and something that Rocky, who's on the call, will not agree with me, is that I'm completely against this idea in the Devanagari when you have the connecting stroke, pinched out to kind of as a reason for optical correction. When it's not needed for optical correction for so many centuries, you don't need to do optical correction. Even though the monolinear, even if the stroke has become monolinear, there are other places where weight can be taken away from. I'm sure there are special cases, there are display typefaces where you can do this. I think for long text, I personally would never kind of lead a project that has this, that kind of thing. But I'm happy for experimentation. Just, it has to, I'm a very brief oriented typeface designer. So as long as that design caters to that specific brief and does it justice, I'm happy to kind of bend my own rules.
Sure. No, see, my take wasn't to take away from the kind of amazing typefaces which a lot of young people like Rocky, Satya, a lot of us have been seeing. We are actually at that stage where I feel the technology and the diversity in using different kind of typefaces for our own languages, we are about 70 years behind schedule, right?
Yeah.
So, and we've also gotten used to seeing a certain kind of typefaces in all our regional magazines. So there's still a lot of scope, as you said, for display type and, more decorative and experimental type as well. But at the same time, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but are you saying this for the younger students and all, that go ahead and experiment, but be consciously aware of the historical references and the roots from where these have come?
Yeah, I think I would definitely agree with that. I would also like to add to what Amit was saying and what you were saying with the idea of we are used to something, right? Typography is something that doesn't change dramatically. I don't want to kind of put everything into one box, but typography for small sizes, for reading, sustained reading, the patterns that you get the reason I'm talking about this is my project at Reading was designing typefaces for school textbooks. So I did a lot of research in understanding reading concepts and kind of knowledge gathering, how it happens through typography. The overall global perception is that at the very core, the shapes don't change drastically in a short time. So to answer Amit's question with regards to can a non-native do this, this makes it very easy for a non-native to do it, because you can look at the past 150 years of typeface design, and if you are a really good graphic designer, you can kind of take all of that learning and create a typeface. Maybe it is a completely vanilla typeface that doesn't really push the state of the art, but it is a typeface that would be extremely functional and very, very useful. So that is one of this kind of ties into your you talking about how we are used to something, and that's why like that ligature of the her and the ru I used was this, I think, was the same idea behind it, because I asked this question to Fiona when I was studying, like, why I don't even recognize these forms anymore. Why are these included and it was obviously because is a typeface for its time, and it has now kind of evolved into being evolved with time, and like things have changed and formalized more.
Wonderful. I am very tempted to also seek your advice for the young students who may or may not be interested in typeface right in the beginning of the college. Could you just share your opinion about the importance of drawing letters with hand or doing a certain bit of calligraphy before one jumps into the digitization? These youngsters have unlike us and some of you guys and Rocky, a lot of these young students were born with the tech in their hand.
Yeah. No, I think it's absolutely useful to do. Useful to do a lot of type sketching, and kind of it helps you, especially with the scripts that have a very strong calligraphic history. It definitely kind of helps you build a concept of proportions, a concept of weight balancing, and kind of weight modulation, and where kind of things go. I definitely like to re-highlight the excellent calligraphy manuals by Aksharaya, and please get in touch with them if you're interested in kind of starting your calligraphy journey. They have some great manuals. I saw that Nupur was on the call, so maybe Nupur, if you can add a link to where they can get in touch.
On our WhatsApp group,
Yeah, so that's a great place to start. We have excellent examples of calligraphy on the WhatsApp group every morning. So talk to these calligraphers that are sharing their work, ask them what they use as reference material. I think it's extremely important. It's great to also look at Western lettering artists, because the way they approach lettering is kind of very interesting, and it'll kind of help you break out of the shell of kind of this very kind of structured script thing where you can experiment a little more. Mark Caneso is an excellent American typeface designer and illustrator and lettering artist that does some great work. And he has these lettering manuals. Ken Barber of House Industries just released a great lettering manual. He's like the godfather of lettering for me. So there are these great resources that you can use for learning handwork. I know I didn't do as much as was expected of me when I was in my bachelor's, and I've heard everybody say this. So they grow to where I am and they kick themselves in the back for not doing, but it's just something that you kind of dismiss out of hand as something clearly not important, because your trajectory is a very digital one, as Tarun said. I think it's even worse for people who are studying now, because they are like already inundated with digital tools and technology.
Wonderful. So Shri sir,
Yes,
It's
thank you
already
very much.
Okay, just one second. Please don't
I
leave.
met him in a jury.
sorry.
I'm just saying, please don't leave, because if
No,
people
I was just
leave,
telling.
the chat will go away and I can't.
No, I'm not leaving. I'm just telling.
No, he has to select the winners of that quiz.
No. I was just telling. I was just sharing my experience with Kalapi. I met him in the. I was his jury.
Okay.
And he had displayed a grid where he had designed a new font in Gujarati, and that was done on a grid. And it was the first time I'm seeing in an applied art institute in final year somebody has done a self-motivated project. It was not part of his curriculum at all. He had done out of his own interest and he had displayed it. So I asked people, who was this student who did this and all. Later, next day I happened to meet him. Wonderful. And then it turned out to be somebody whom I knew his parents.
Achha.
And then after seeing his work, I realized that this is the person who's tailor-made for Reading. So I told him there is a university called Reading and Fiona Ross teaches there, and I gave him the details, and the rest is history. And I am very happy that whenever he meets me, he gives me all the credit for him to go to Reading and all. He keeps saying that very rarely in this world we keep meeting people who remember all those things. And Fiona Rose is also a wonderful person to meet and discuss. I was very shocked. First meeting herself, she said, "Call me Fiona. Don't call me professor or doctor." I was very surprised. She's such a senior person, and how can I call her by the first name? I have never done that even today. But it was very nice, Kalapi, and it was very tough in such a short time frame to give this much of information. Very well presented, and we are very happy to see your work and your vision towards the whole thing. See, the vision, your viewpoint, your world view is extremely important for other people to learn from. Especially there are a lot of our students who are attending this. So you're a very good source of inspiration, and you focus very well on the vision a designer needs. Methodology and the output and the money will all come later, but the viewpoint, is the understanding of the subject and the viewpoint and the view you have, your personal philosophy is extremely important. So you have really touched on that very important aspect of it. I really thank. And I request even now all the students who are here.
I have a small. Can I take a minute? Just half a minute.
Please. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. This is to both Kalapi and you, GV. So we have heard Arjun today. And when can we hear the Dronacharya? I mean, when can we actually hear Fiona Ross in this group? I have been requesting a lot of people to invite her. Okay, so after hearing Kalapi, I think it's high time we should invite her and maybe use Kalapi's good offices. So
we will do it. Fingers crossed. I really hope she's in good health now, and we look forward to her participation in this.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, she was looking forward to watching this video, which I'm going to be extremely embarrassed about because I have kind of skipped over so much
Kalapi,
minutia.
Please invite her on our behalf and convey my special regards to her.
Obviously, yeah, absolutely. I will do that. Absolutely. So there is one clear winner because you answered both questions. So on the left, the outline drawing was, like I mentioned, because it used the pantographic system. So you had to scan on the outline, which didn't require a fill. And in the second system, you required a fill because you had to expose it. So Shaili wins because she mentions all of these terms that we need to be mentioned to win, including pantograph and even like the size of the type drawing. And Abhinav, you're a close second. You've not mentioned details about hot metal, or why it is an outline. So Abhinav and Shaili, if you can send me your mailing addresses.
I would request both Shaili and Abhinav to switch on their videos. Let's see who these young students are who are actually reading, stuff. Shaili, are you here?
Please, Shaili.
Congratulations, Shaili.
Thank you so much.
Hello. And Abhinav is also there. So quickly tell us, where are you studying?
Hi, Abhinav.
Hello, sir. Hello, everybody. I'm a second year Bachelor of Design student from DJ Academy.
Very good. And Shaili?
Coimbatore. Yeah.
Yeah. So hi everyone. I am currently in the final year. I am in final year of bachelor's at MSU Applied Arts. Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
Oh, MSU. Yeah. Kalapi and me, both of us are from
Congratulations.
Congratulations. He found us a good successor.
Very good successor.
Absolutely. Okay, so you can either I don't know how you can get in touch with me. I'm at Kalapi on Twitter. If you want to send me your addresses there, you can send it to me there, or you can email me kalapi@universalthirst.com. Either way is fine.
Or else they can take your number from the WhatsApp group and
yeah.
send you a one-on-one also.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely forgot about that. Perfect.
So Shri sir, such a wonderful session it was. We'll conclude this session now. Thank you so much, Kalapi. Thank you everyone for joining in. A big shout out to Rishabh as well. And Kalapi, there are no NDAs attached with this conversation, which we had. So Rishabh is going to take care of the video recording of this and share it on our WhatsApp group also.
Yeah, no worries. I already provided consent. So.
Sure. And he will also get in touch with you. You've taken some names of some hand lettering artists and all those things. So we'll get the correct spelling and also look up on their links and share it in the WhatsApp group as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Not
wonderful.
A problem. Thank you so much for having me. A very happy Onam to everybody. And looking forward to seeing the next session.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in.
Thank you very much. I request Shaili and Abhinav to write a mail to me. I will send you the WhatsApp group invite. I have given my email ID here on the... Shaili and Abhinav, can you hear me? Okay. Thank you very much, Kalapi. On behalf of the entire family, I want to thank you for giving this wonderful talk.
Most welcome.
Thank you, Kalapi, and thank you, Shri sir. Thank you, Shri and Kalapi.
Thank you very much.
Hello, bye everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Happy Onam to everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Happy Onam.
Happy Onam.